Crafting a Meaningful Life.
Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. I'm Mary Crafts, and I get to be here today with a very special guest. And I want to tell you why I've had her on today. We're in the middle of an absolutely stressful time in our country. I don't have to tell you that. You know that. You're living it. And so many times we ask ourselves the question, what can I do? I'm just one. There's nothing I can do. I just have to take what comes because I'm just one person. I can't make a difference. Well, this woman, Sandy Rosenthal, who's my guest today, did make a difference, a huge difference, and she's just one. And so I'm excited to have on my show and to learn all about Sandy and what she did. So please welcome with me Sandy Rosenthal. Sandy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mary. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah. Well, let's start with letting the listeners know a little bit about you. From your accent, people will know you're from Boston, but you don't
That's
live there.
right.
You've lived 40 years in the city of New Orleans.
Yes.
So how
and
did
40
you
years
have?
in the same house.
Yeah, that's amazing that anyone nowadays lives 40 years in the same house. I actually lived 32 years in my previous house, and just recently moved to this one because it's smaller, more compact. Everything's on one level, thinking ahead for what life looks like at 80, so here we go. So Sandy, how did you come to be in New Orleans?
I met a man.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, he was a boy when I met him. I was 20, he was 21. No, excuse me, I was 19 and he was 20. And we met when we were still in undergraduate college. I was at Mount Holyoke and he was at Amherst. And we fell in love and got married. And I believe the day that we met, he told me that he's from New Orleans and would never live anywhere else. And he wasn't joking.
Okay. So I have to just say that's kind of an odd thing for a woman from Boston to think that she can move to the South, to New Orleans, and just be happy as a lark. I mean, was that frightening for you?
Well, I admit, I remember my number one memory growing up was I was always cold. That New England is cold.
Yes, freezing.
And closer to the water, it's usually damp and cold. It's not like the Berkshire Mountains of Massachusetts. So,
Right.
so I made the transition, and I love the spicy food.
So you walked right into something that was kind of your genre of the spicy Cajun food and enjoying all the things in New Orleans. I love that. And you can tell I love New Orleans because I know how to say it, like with marbles in
Yeah.
your mouth. New Orleans. It's
Very good.
It's one
Very
word.
good.
It's not two words. I've been there many times. I've never been there for Mardi Gras, though. That's the crazy part.
Come for Jazz Fest.
That's usually what I come down there for, or I've been to many food conferences in New Orleans and
of course.
eaten at a lot of the wonderful restaurants. I absolutely love visiting New Orleans, but you chose to live there.
Mm-hmm.
There was something that happened in New Orleans that set your feet on an entirely different path. Let's start with what you were doing and then what happened to move your feet in a completely different direction.
Certainly. So I had been living in New Orleans already for 20 years, 20 plus, just a little bit. I was at a point in my life where I'd paid my dues. So what I mean by that is I could work at home part-time. Or I could work part-time. We weren't working at home at that period of our lives, but I was working part-time. So I was able to do what I loved and what I was good at on a part-time basis, which gave me time to play tennis during the day or spend time with my one child that was still at home during the day. Things that the normal grind, the 8 to 5 doesn't allow. So, but bottom line, I'd reached a happy place. A happy, satisfying place in my life. And all of that changed overnight on August 29, 2005.
And as many of you who listen to this podcast know that in 2005, we just celebrated, well, I don't know, celebrated, had remembrance of this day, of the 20-year anniversary of Katrina hitting the United States and the devastation in New Orleans. So tell me about that.
Certainly. We knew that a storm was coming by only 2 days. The storm had changed course. It was supposed to hit the Florida Panhandle. We found out on Friday night that no, it's heading straight for New Orleans. So we had very little time to get ready for this storm that, again, we knew nothing about. All we knew that it was going to be powerful.
Yeah.
So we boarded up the house. We picked up things off the floor as best we could because we feared there might have been some what we call inconvenient flooding, soggy carpets, wet ankles, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we loaded up the dog and my two sons at that time into the car and prepared to evacuate because my husband was in the insurance industry and
Oh,
he knew from his work, property casualty work, that there would be no phones, no electricity, no air conditioning, no internet.
yeah.
And so he told me to pack for 3 weeks. And I can honestly say to your listeners, I believe I'm the only family that packed for 3 weeks. Everybody else packed for just a couple of days, just for a
Yeah.
weekend.
Yeah.
So that singular thing probably put me on the straight and narrow path to figuring out what went wrong because I was prepared. I had my checkbook. I had everything I needed because
Right.
we found out after we evacuated there was no going home. The levees breached in 50 different places. The city filled up like a cereal bowl with water and stayed that way for at least 6 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. If someone had said to me, pack for 3 weeks, because we don't have floods here in Utah, but we have earthquakes.
Uh,
And it's always like the saying is here, it's not if, it's when that earthquake is going to be coming. And if someone said to me, okay, Mary, we need to get off this fault line, pack for 3 weeks, I would probably say, nothing ever goes on for 3 weeks. But you believed your husband, and that peace really allowed you to survive and survive fairly well as compared to all your neighbors that were packed for just 2 days.
Didn't have their checkbook, didn't have all the things you have to have. And in addition to that, my home didn't flood. Of course, I wouldn't know that for weeks, but
Yeah.
my home didn't flood, so I didn't have to spend my time dealing with FEMA, a contractor, the insurance company. So I call me lucky, but it also put me in a very unique position that I could pay attention to what was going on around us because the majority of the people, the overwhelming majority, were trying to figure out, where will I work? How will I make a living? Where will I live? Where will my children go to school?
Yeah. Yeah, just that moment-to-moment need. Not even a
Moment
day-to-day need, but it's a moment-to-moment need.
and life's basic needs.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people, as we know, were evacuated to the Superdome and the disaster that went on there. So as you're watching all this really human suffering around you and property damage and experiencing that, there seemed to be some questions that arose inside of you that started a different direction for you.
And I just have to add one thing, the death. There were almost 1,400 deaths.
The
And not
deaths.
to mention people's pets.
Yeah.
At that time, FEMA would not allow pets on any buses. And so they were told, no, you cannot bring your pet. And many people said, okay, I won't evacuate, and stayed and perished with their pets.
Uh,
So I'm sorry, I just had to add that it wasn't
please.
just destruction; it was a huge amount of death. But okay, so yes,
Sandy,
something did change in me.
thank you for saying that because I honestly had forgotten that number. I had forgotten that
1,300.
it was 1,400 souls
Mm-hmm.
perished. Thank you. That's an overwhelming amount for any community. Wow.
You're welcome, and that's what I'm here for.
Yeah. Keep me quoting facts correctly. Thank you. And putting it's out there what's important. So because of all that, there began to be this question that rose inside of you like, why did this happen? I'm sorry,
Mhm.
we had built all these levees out there. The government made sure New Orleans was safe. So what happened next?
So we thought. We were so secure in the knowledge that the federal government should be able to help us. I mean, who would ever travel on a federally built bridge on an interstate and worry that the bridge would fall down? I mean, we don't worry about the things the federal government builds for us.
Yeah.
So, so it was no differently for our levees that we not only did the federal government build for us, we paid for a third of them. So no, there was no when we left. When we evacuated in front of Hurricane Katrina's storm surge, before the surge arrived, we were concerned, as I already mentioned, maybe some wet carpets, maybe some soggy ankles. Certainly, no one had any idea that the levees could actually breach. And in addition to that, not one call by authorities gave any warning that the levees could break. It was
Mm,
unthinkable.
right. Right. And the structure and the way that these levees were built, I think you mentioned that it was like a cereal bowl. So it really was, there's this, in the way that New Orleans is, that you come in and it's kind of this depression in the earth and then it raises up and goes out. And there was nowhere for that water to go.
That's right. It's geographical. Water is always high next to a river. And next to a lake. And it's from thousands of years of the water washing over the banks and building up what's called a natural levee. In addition to that, there were some man-made structures, drainage canals. And it's those drainage canals and the natural structures that created that bowl that we spoke of. The technical term is polder, but everyone knows what a bowl is, so let's use that one.
Okay. And so as you began to question, how did this happen? How did these levees break? That's when your real work began.
The initial narrative was a monster storm. No one could have foreseen it. No levees were built high enough that could have protected us. That was the initial
Yep.
narrative,
Yep.
along with a narrative of, well, New Orleans is below sea level, and this is bound to happen. And then the third, which was most painful for me to hear, was, well, they're all corrupt down there, and they stole the money for the levees and spent it on a fountain in City Park. Silly things like that. Nobody
Yeah.
steals money from the federal government and gets away with it. But still, that was the narrative. And for some reason, well, actually, I know why. It was bought hook, line, and sinker because all of the people who live here were busy with life's most basic needs. None of us could rise up and say, excuse me, this isn't our fault. But the belief was that it was our fault. As I mentioned earlier, I didn't flood and I had 3 weeks of supplies with me. And so I decided to speak up. And the moment I spoke out and said, no, this is wrong. The real reason those levees broke is because the Army Corps of Engineers misdesigned and constructed them. I immediately got pushback. I immediately got attacked. Keep in mind, I'm just a resident of New Orleans. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an elected official. I'm just a citizen of this city. And I got attacked quickly. And I realized, well, I must be right.
Right. If anyone is paying that much attention to this woman, single woman, just one person living in New Orleans, she's not even from New Orleans, and and she's blonde, okay, but then to have all this attention focused on you to silence you,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
had to know
And
there was
that's
something.
20 years later, they're still at it, but it's gotten very difficult for them. That's we can discuss that later. But in the beginning, it was quite vicious. I was called every name in the book. An uptown woman with nothing to do. So everybody wants to be an engineer now, and you name the slander, I got it. But it empowered me. It made me realize, wow, if I'm getting all this
Yeah,
attention, I must be either exactly right or certainly on the right path.
right. And where did the pushback come from?
Okay, great question. Keep in mind, this is 2005. In 2005, social media was just getting started. But
Yeah.
what we did have in 2005 is most publications had online commenting. Most newspapers, the Boston Globe, New York Times, have this online commenting where you can leave a comment on a news article. And it was in these comments that I was attacked. And they were
Uh,
public out there for everyone to see. And it was anonymous 20 years ago. And what happened is it was abused. And it was abused by the very people who were supposed to be protecting us, the Army Corps of Engineers. So that's what happened. Keep in mind, it's
yeah.
20 years ago. It
Right.
didn't take long for the New York Times, Boston Globe, all these publications, Los Angeles Times, to realize this abuse was going on, and they no longer allow anonymous commenting. But that went on for years. It went on
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
several years, at least 5 years.
Wow.
Hmm.
And so you didn't give up. You pushed on.
I
Why?
pushed on
Why did
because
you push on?
all I had to do was look around me, and I could see everywhere I looked there were people who either lost their job, lost their home, lost their auntie who died in her attic trying to chop her way out. All I had to do, I didn't have to look far. 80% of the city of New Orleans flooded because of the failure of the levees, and that's the reason I did this. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't guilt. It was because keep in mind I didn't flood. I just felt I had to do something, and my training, my background is copywriting, which served me well
Yeah.
when I created the group levees.org with a mission of getting the truth out about why New Orleans flooded. But also critically important was my 15-year-old son who created a website. And that was something else that was fledgling 20 years ago, the
Yeah.
idea of having your own website.
Right.
So it started out me and my 15-year-old son who had just turned 15.
And they're the only ones that actually knew anything about the internet anyway.
That's right. Kids, and that's still true today.
Yeah. I can remember when the first time someone said to me, well, instead of faxing that to me, can you email it to me? And my response was, I think I can as soon as my kids get home from school.
Right.
Because I had no idea how to do that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So did you know at the time how big the project was you were taking on?
No, no, I thought the project would take a year, maybe two. And I also did not know how difficult it would be. And usually, when you take on a project, for your listeners out there, it usually takes a little longer than you thought it would,
Always.
and usually will be a little harder than you thought it would,
Always.
and and usually a little more expensive than you thought it would.
Always.
But yes, but all those things did not stop me because what I did was I was the leader. But when you speak up and say, no, this is wrong, something needs to be done, people will come to you. All kinds of experts will come to you. Attorneys will offer their expertise pro bono. Media specialists will offer their expertise pro bono. Copywriters will come to you. I didn't need that, but they will come to you. And these experts will
Hmm.
see that you have stood up to do something right, and they will offer to help you. They don't all come in within 24 hours, but you keep shouting on your soapbox, they will come. So
Yeah.
do not worry. Do not, if you see something out there that needs to be done, you see a problem, don't concern yourself with the fact that you don't know all the answers and you don't have all the expertise. Speak up, it will come.
Yeah. So I think the very first thing that you had to overcome and set behind you were any fears that would have stopped you. Personal fears, not outside fears, but your own personal fears.
I believe that a lot of people are fearful to speak up because they fear criticism and pushback.
Hmm. Hmm.
And my what I learned, I didn't know this 20 years ago, but I learned it now. Welcome criticism because it's free advice. It's free information. critics unwittingly, unknowingly provide you with information that you need to know in order to do your job. And they're obviously not doing it to help you. They're doing it because they have this wrong idea that they're going to stop you. But no, welcome that criticism, embrace it, ask for it.
I love that. That's brilliant. And I hope all of my listeners really paid attention to that, to welcome this, what we term as criticism, but is actually a stepping stone for us to find our way forward.
And it doesn't cost a dime.
And it doesn't cost anything. You could pay for that advice, and your critics are going to offer it to you for free. I love that.
And there are many times in my book, Words Whispered in Water, I've detailed where it was my critics who gave me information I needed to know or helped me realize something I hadn't thought about before. The critics.
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. That's brilliant. So hold up your book again, Words Whispered in Water. I think the title is so profound and to start with. And I love the cover that it's like almost kind of black and white, there's some brown tones in there, but it's so indicative of what you were experiencing down there.
Turner Publishing designed this cover. I love it. This is the special anniversary edition. It also has a foreword written by Jordan Chariton, who is the major journalist covering the Flint water crisis. And as for the title, which you pointed out, what that means is that was definitely intentional. Words whispered in water. Always beware when you hear mayhem being blamed on wind and water, because human beings are hiding behind those words.
Interesting. It's when things are blamed on wind and water.
Bad things.
Mayhem. People hide behind those words.
Yep.
Talk to me about that.
Certainly. So in the days and weeks after the flooding, the Army Corps of Engineers, the people responsible for the design and construction of those levees, were out there immediately, in less than 24 hours, claiming that the levees were overtopped by water and that the storm was just too great, when actually that was not true at all. So they were blaming the weather. They were blaming the construction failures on the weather, on the water. And it turned out, no, the Army Corps of Engineers was hiding behind those words. They were the designer and the contractor and the architect, all three.
Right.
If a brand new building, if a brand new building fell to the ground, these levees were new, okay, 5 years old. If a brand new building fell to the ground, you wouldn't blame the janitor. You'd look to the contractor, the architect, and the engineer. Yeah. And in the case of levees, the Army Corps of Engineers is all three of those.
How did you step into that? And because it wasn't the Army Corps that was stepping up and saying, "You're right, we really messed up," how did you discover that it was actually a fault of the construction rather than the wind and the water?
Okay. I'm going to start by saying, when you see a problem, you don't have to know all the answers, but you do need to know the questions. And it's important to ask the questions. Why did these levees fail? Whose responsibility is it to build these levees? Who designed them? Ask the questions. And don't worry if you don't know the answer. That's okay. How can just a citizen of this city know all the answers? Nobody does. So let's start with that. Don't worry about that. But what put me on the straight and narrow path was because I didn't flood, I was able to read the newspaper, watch television, and listen to the radio. Keep in mind, this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And I heard about the Government Accountability Office had issued a report, the first, 4 weeks after the flooding, of the who, what, and why about the flooding. Well, I searched for that report online, found it, and there it was on page 2. Bright and clear. The Army Corps of Engineers designs and builds levees. The local districts, the local levee boards, maintain them. If you recall, I mentioned earlier, if a brand new building falls to the ground, do you blame the janitor? No. 4 weeks after the flooding, our local levee district people were being blamed for the flooding.
Wow.
So that
That's
was it. So
such a
that
great
report,
analogy. Yeah.
that report, I tucked that report under my arm and kept asking questions, kept screaming on my soapbox. And I also found out about a handy dandy little right we all have as citizens. It's called the Freedom of Information Act. Any citizen, anyone, you, me, any of your listener can ask the federal government for documents, for information, as long as it's there. If it doesn't exist, they'll say we can't give it to you. It doesn't exist. And I've filed so many, I've literally lost count. And
Wow.
again, they don't cost a dime. It's free. It's as free as the air we breathe and our First Amendment right. It's
I
free.
just, I stand in awe, Sandy, because you just kept pushing. That's why you were able to do this, is you didn't give up. I think there are lots of us who are happy to step in and say something and start waving our arms, but then eventually we get tired or we lose interest or we like give up. Oh, I'm not going to make a difference. You were just like a bulldog. You just kept moving forward.
Uh, I did, and I believe for two reasons. One, I did, and I was able to. So I did because I felt that if I stopped, the whole house of cards would fall down. Everything needs a leader. Nothing leads itself. Okay. Now, no one human being can do everything, but a campaign or a movement must have a leader. But the other thing that is important is I truly every single day worked on self-care. Every day I made
Ah,
sure I did something for moi, for myself. Even
yes.
if it was
I
conditioning my
love
hair,
that.
even if it was taking the dog for an extra long walk and not just the pee walk, okay, a
Right.
real walk for the dog. Something for myself, a conversation on the phone with a girlfriend, call my sister every single day, because if you don't, your campaign, your mission that you're working on will eat you alive.
Yeah.
It will
Such
exhaust
good
you.
advice. Wow. That when you're involved in this kind of a thing is not the time to set aside self-care. It's the time to embrace it even more. Such great
Yoga.
advice.
I practice yoga several times a week. It doesn't have to be the whole afternoon. You can do yoga for 20 minutes.
Yeah. That's what I always say when I show up to the gym just before they're ready to close. And they're like, ma'am, we're closing in 35 minutes. And I always say, hey, 30 minutes of something is better than 4 hours of nothing, you know? And so
Perfect.
yeah, just go in and give it, kind of thing. Well, you created a movement down there and an awareness. You actually took this to the point where the Army Corps of Engineers assumed responsibility.
They
Phenomenal.
they didn't like it. They preferred to change the subject. They're masters at changing the subject. Masters at saying things like, "Well, we prefer to move on and think about rebuilding and think about tomorrow rather than building." And it turns up that it's military thinking. The military will never ever admit they've made a mistake. The military has this right, RITE, right, that to criticize a former leader and to say that a former leader in the military made a mistake is the equivalent of bayoneting the wounded. It's something they do not do. But
Right.
what did truly happen, though, is the Army Corps of Engineers issued an investigative report, and in their report, they did uh, describe their failures, why they happened. It is in their report called it's called the ILIT, ILIT, Independent Levee Investigation. No, excuse me, IPET, Independent, uh, I forgot what IPET stands for, but it's IPET. That's
Okay.
the Army Corps of Engineers official investigation.
and they were able to admit. And now what has happened with those levees?
With what happened with those levees is they don't build them that way anymore. They were called eye walls. They were a single sheet of steel sheet piling driven into the ground. But what happened was, though, they would deflect when water would go underneath those levees, and they not only did they fall over at half the water pressure they were designed to hold, but some of the canals fell over on both sides. I mean, you would think if a levee fell on one side, the other side would stay up. In the case of one of the major drainage canals, it went on both sides. They were doomed to failure. Hurricane Katrina, to me, means the day that a moderately wet, moderately windy hurricane exposed engineering mistakes by the Army Corps.
Wow. And so what has happened as a result? How are things different now? Because I read a statistic in your on your website that's just stopped me. It said 62% of our U.S. population live in cities that are protected by levees. How's that even possible? I never even thought about that.
Nearly 2/3 of the American population lives in counties protected by levees. And that was yet another statistic that I found with the Freedom of Information Act. I didn't just find that somewhere online. I had to ask for it. And I also asked for, where are these levees?
Yeah.
Who lives in these counties protected by levees? And it took a year, but I finally got that information. So yes, we all should be concerned about how our levees are built. Are they properly built? I can reassure your listeners that because of what happened to us 20 years ago, the Army Corps of Engineers has discontinued building levees that protect people with eye walls. They're still being used to protect farmland and cattle and crops, but not people. Okay, now they're building with something called a T-wall. And as for the city of the T-wall, let me back up just a moment. The T-wall is 3 times as expensive, but 10 times more reliable than the eye wall. And as for the people of New Orleans, nobody got a dime from the federal government in terms of to help us rebuild, other than something called the Road Home Act, which did not make us whole. However, what we did get from the federal government was a bright, shiny new levee system. We do have that. Now, it's not the only thing that was important. Try to tell someone who lost their aunt that that's the only thing that matters.
Yeah.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. This new system comes at huge human cost. However, for people trying to decide whether to stay here and live here, or people trying to decide whether they're to move here, we do have a very, very good system to protect us from storm surge moving on. Is it perfect? No. But I don't think there's any place in the country that is perfectly protected from all types of events.
It's hard to perfectly protect you from nature.
It is.
But it's a whole different thing. And to say that it's not perfect, but it's our very best.
Much, much better. This is the system we should have had when Hurricane Katrina's surge arrived 20 years ago. And we should have. There's no reason that we shouldn't have. Another complaint that the Army Corps of Engineers liked to bandy about was we didn't have the money. Congress didn't give us the money. There's no evidence to back that up. They were allowed to build whatever they wanted. They made a mistake. They did a study and were looking for ways to save money on steel, which is very expensive. It's expensive to buy, and it's also expensive to drive it into the ground, 30 feet into the ground.
Yeah.
So they did 45 feet into the ground. So they did a study to look for ways to save money and use less steel. And they determined in the 1980s they only needed to drive steel sheet piling down 16 feet because any more than that was a waste of money. So instead of driving the steel sheet piling down 46 feet, there was only 16 feet. And they issued new guidances for all the levees in the New Orleans area. 16 feet, that's all you have to push those levees, those steel sheet piling down. And then, as we all know, on August 29, 2005, they fell over like matchsticks. The Army Corps of Engineers made a mistake. So there was a lawsuit. and just about everyone in the city that flooded joined that lawsuit. In the end, the federal judge Stanwood Duval had to dismiss the case because the Army Corps of Engineers was protected from liability should its flood protection projects fail by the Flood Control Act of 1928.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you a
You
very
can't
social.
sue the king. You can't sue the king. The bottom
What
line.
happens when you come at the king, right?
Mhm.
So I have to ask. This is a social question.
Sure.
Was there any sense in New Orleans that because it was New Orleans, that they didn't take as much care on your levees as maybe they might do in another city?
That's a good question. There was this belief that the local levee districts weren't paying attention to the levees. Um, that was one of the front and center narratives out there, and that was the impetus behind changing the local levee districts, the way they operate, and how the commissioners are selected, et cetera, et cetera. But that legislation and that belief was out there just 6 weeks, 7 weeks after the flooding. It was before all the dead were even found. It was
Uh,
when there was still water in the city. So in other words, the people that wanted that to happen was the business community. And in my mind, it was about money. And I've been quoted as saying that it was about money. It wasn't about protecting the people. The legislation got passed with the belief that the locals were responsible and that locals were not paying attention to flood protection, when it turns out that wasn't the case at all. They absolutely were paying attention, and they were the maintenance people. They maintain the levees after they're built, and they were
sure.
doing a perfectly fine job of that. So, in answer to your question, it wasn't New Orleans in terms of the failure of the levees. It isn't because this was the city of New Orleans. However, if you'd like to discuss the aftermath and how quickly help arrived, or excuse me, how slowly help arrived, that is another huge conversation, the subject of many, many, many books, the subject of documentaries that have been many have released, including recent ones, Netflix,
Yeah.
Come Hell or High Water, and there's a Nat Geo documentary as well. The aftermath, the response was pathetic.
Yeah.
Was pathetic. That is not the subject of which I am expert, but it is something that I saw with my own eyes.
Yeah. I read a book, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, that was entitled How Things Change.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you've ever read it, but it talked about the different things in our country that have changed that no one thought could change, but they did. And it gave the example of seatbelts. And it gave the example of smoking in public areas and smoking on airplanes and smoking in restaurants. It quoted examples of drunk driving. And when I was in high school, that was just kind of like an accepted thing. You'd see people drink, they'd get in a car and drive. There was no focus or no even attention to, I'm sorry, I'm going to take your keys. You just drove. And one woman started whose child was killed by a drunk driver, and she created Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. And now the amount of legislation, attention, social awareness, and everyone on board is crazy because one woman started a movement. You are like that woman. You created huge change in the levee system around our country. And in New Orleans, one woman.
To start and lead. I didn't
Yeah,
do it alone. I didn't do, but yes, and the woman who started MADD, obviously didn't do it alone, but she started it.
right.
Absolutely. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And so I just think that right now there are, I'm I'm involved in 27 different nonprofits. And some I'm involved a lot in, some I'm involved a little in. And probably one of the ones that I work the most in is Sapria, which is they work with childhood sexual abuse, both on the healing side and on the prevention side. And I get a lot of that where just people are like, honey, this is a problem of the centuries. You're never going to change that needle. Um, you'd have to completely get inside every human being, rip out their souls, put new souls into them because it's just the way it is. And yet, I continue to stand every day, me and thousands of others, that we can move the needle. And you are such a great example to me, Sandy, of never going away, of never sitting down, of never giving up. You continued to stay there and to believe and to rally forces. I think that's one of the things you were best at, is rallying forces to dig and to find out all these things. You're an example to every woman listening to this podcast that one can make a difference.
Absolutely. I have a question to ask you about mothers against drunk drivers. Have you heard about DAM?
No.
Mothers Against Dyslexia. It's a joke. It's a joke about. It's a little joke. I'm not trying to make light about something very serious, but sometimes you just have to laugh.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to laugh. When I was working with getting levees.org started, one of the many people I met because of my work, that's one very positive thing about getting involved in a campaign. You meet so many people that you otherwise might not have met. And one of the people I met, his name was Lon Z. Beeman. And Mr. Beeman used to say, yeah, after the levees broke, I couldn't get to my place because there was a house in the middle of the street. And he'd
Yeah,
laugh
right?
about it.
Yeah.
What else are you going to do? You have to
Yeah.
smile, you have to laugh, and you have to keep going.
And you have to keep going. Wow. I think I can, without question, I'm going to get this book. If anyone has any desire and to find out what it takes to move a movement forward and to make change, whether it's massive societal change or a single change within your community, this book has so many keys as people begin to move forward to make a difference. You've given us all hope, Sandy. So, this is my podcast title, Crafting a Meaningful Life. So, I would like you to share with my listeners, what is your one piece of wisdom to leave with my listeners about crafting a meaningful life?
If you would like to change something important in your world, it could be your homeowners association. It could be helping a migrating songbird. It doesn't matter what it is. Those who are trying to stop you are no different from the bullies in the third grade playground. They're bigger than you are, but they're not smarter than you are. And the bigger they are, the bigger their mistakes. So just keep reminding yourself, if they're trying to stop you, they're just bullies in the third grade playground. And we all know what they turn out to be.
Yeah. Not smarter. Yeah.
Not smarter.
I had plenty of bullies I had to deal with in the third grade playground. That just brought back a ton of memories. And
Mm-hmm.
I look at what I've accomplished and where I am today versus those people who yelled all those things at me and wanted me to believe I was nothing. Sandy, thank you so much for your time and your soul that has pushed this forward and created change for New Orleans and been such a gift and example to us.
Thank you so much, Mary. It was a pleasure.
And at the end of this podcast, of course, we've included all the links for Sandy's book, her website, levees.org, and all the wonderful things I know you're going to want to continue to learn about Sandy. And until next time, let us all think deeply and sincerely about what are those things that are our passions, that are in our lives where we want to make a difference and be about crafting your meaningful life. Namaste.
Crafting a Meaningful Life.